friends, this is Caitlin, and this week I am super excited to share with you a sneak peek of the April Pink and Main release. Every month they put out new products, and this month is absolutely gorgeous. So I'm sharing here the Here For You stamp set, which is these very large sentiments. I absolutely love them. And then the other one that we're going to be using today is the floral sprays, which are absolutely gorgeous and were what inspired my whole design today. So we'll be using the smooth side of this distress watercolor paper because we're going to be doing some heat embossing, and the new embossing products from Pink and Main are absolutely amazing. So today I'm using the new ink and embossing powders. So before we get started, if you haven't already, now is the best time to go ahead and click that subscribe button, and that way you never miss out on fun inspiration every Friday. So I'm going to be starting out by embossing the larger of the floral sprays from this stamp set. I don't have the dies for these yet. They're on their way to me. But in the meantime, my favorite way to use a stamped image when I don't have a die is to make it basically the feature of the whole thing. And I thought, what better way to make it so that I don't have to worry about fussy cutting this than to watercolor it. That's right. We're going to be doing some Emboss Resist with watercolor today. I've tried out Emboss Resist before, but most of the time when I use this technique, I am ink blending and using a brush and, just kind of blending right on top and then wiping the excess ink off of the embossed area. But today I decided to do watercolor embossing just because I thought that the florals in this were so beautiful, and I really fell in love with the embossing powder I'm using. Now this is a new product for Pink and Main. It's called Icicle, and it is the most beautiful iridescent rainbow kind of glitter in white. I'm pretty sure it's white. It could technically be clear. I should probably double check that and leave a note down in the description for you when I figure it out. But it's gorgeous. I can tell you that part. I absolutely love it. And so I stamped my floral image probably 3 or 4 times just to make sure that even though I used the smooth side of the distress watercolor paper, that I had a really good clear image. And I used lots of powder from my little embossing bag. Pink and Main is also coming out with their own embossing or static removing powder with a cute little brush and everything, where the powder is like inside the brush. They'll have that in time for the release. We are still waiting to get them on the design team, but it's going to be super handy because the little bag that I use is great, but it is kind of messy. So I am definitely looking forward to having that cute little brush. But I loaded that up and I stamped down one of those sentiments next to the floral and did that one in just clear embossing powder. And now I am going in to pick out my inks to do my watercoloring. So one of my favorite ways to watercolor is to use my distress inks. So here I have Tattered Rose, Saltwater Taffy, Shabby Shutters, Bundled Sage, and a little bit of Rustic Wilderness. And I grabbed an extra green more than I normally would, just because there's 2 different kinds of leaves within this spray. And so I wanted the longer leaves that are up at the top to have a little bit of a different tone than the ones that are down with the flowers. So I started out by going in with a medium brush and just a little bit of clear, clean water. And I'm laying that down on all of those petal sections on that middle flower. And now I'm just going to go in and start picking up some of the Tattered Rose ink from my little palette there. And I am just kind of literally plopping it in. I use the corner of my paper towel just to wipe up any of that excess ink that kind of puddled on the middle embossing area. And the thing I love about doing watercolor with the Emboss Resist is normal watercolor for me just takes so long while you're waiting for everything to dry, and you have to be very mindful of your sections so that your colors don't bleed depending on the look you're going for. And I love that with the Emboss, it kind of acts as a little barrier or wall around your images, and so you don't have to wait for each section to dry. So I did still work in kind of color sections, doing all of my flowers first and then all of my greenery, but that was more to do with making sure that I was keeping my brush clean and my water kind of clean, more so than worrying about things kind of bleeding together. And by the end, I got a little messy with this piece, and I think that it's a really cool and a pretty take on this, but obviously you could do this as messy or as neat as you want. And if you are used to doing one way versus the other, I highly encourage you to try, even though it can be a little bit scary, to try the other way. Like if you always are really neat with your watercolor, just once try being really messy, or the other way around. It's really fun to kind of grow and expand your art and just kind of keep your mind fresh with these different ideas, I think. So once I had my flowers done, I had gone back in with the Saltwater Taffy just to deepen up the shadows around the center parts of those flowers. And now I'm going in kind of layering the lighter, the Shabby Shutters shade first into those flowers, and then just going over, trying to stay more towards the center and the spine of each flower with the Rustic Wilderness. But I also didn't hold myself too serious about, placement. I really do love the little bit of blend and kind of how the inks travel within the confines of that embossing. And so I did want some of that classic watercolor feel. So I didn't get too controlling about where those colors were placed, just kind of really quickly working my way through all the way around, filling in those leaves. And then that last color, that bundled sage, I mostly used on those taller flowers that are up at the top. So there are definitely more stamp sets than what I'm showing you today that are coming out. There's also a ton of other colors of the embossing powder that are coming out with this release that are so much fun. I decided to stick with the glitter one for this just because I absolutely love the glitter. But some of the other colors, I cannot wait to see what the other design team members and what you guys do with those embossing powder colors. I think they're gorgeous, and I know that there's going to be things that I never would have thought of in a million years as far as using those powders, and I can't wait to see what everybody does with them. So I wanted to create an outline around my floral image that would kind of swoosh over to the right to fill in the back part of my sentiment. And so originally I thought I was going to do this all in green, but then once I started, I decided that the green outline up against those green leaves was just going to kind of take away and make everything feel a little too green, a little too muddy. I wanted there to be a little more separation. So when I'm done coloring in those tall leaves, I'm going to grab Frayed Burlap and Ground Espresso Distress inks, and I'm going to use those brown shades to outline my piece, and I think that it just absolutely takes this whole thing to the next level. So I'm just using a little bit of that clean water and my paper towel to wipe off the excess ink off of my little palette. And now I'm grabbing those brown inks and I'll just smush them down the same way I did before and start going in right around the outside of my stamped images, and then just kind of very messily work my way out to the edges of the paper. So I laid down a little water over that green that I had placed just to kind of help the ink cover it as much as I could without having super harsh lines. I didn't want there to be like a solid wall border around my floral piece. I did want it to kind of bleed over. And I knew that I wanted to use more of that Ground Espresso, that darker brown, under my sentiment so it would be very easy to read. So you could see I kind of laid down a little squiggle and then went in with some water to blend that out. And I keep going back in with my little paper towel just to make sure that any of that extra ink doesn't dry on top of that embossing powder. So it's very easy to just remove it. Just make sure that your paper towel is clean so you're not getting ink bleeding out into colors where they shouldn't be. That the pinks and the greens together would probably make their own very interesting brown, but it wouldn't match the browns that I'm using intentionally. So I did try to be mindful about that. And I found that in some places where I was using a lighter ink on the inside, like those taller leaves, the frayed burlap just didn't give enough contrast to create a clear outline of the image. So when you're doing this kind of reverse negative outline versus having a black outline or a darker outline, I really found that bumping up those deeper colors and using the ground espresso more right along those embossed stamped lines really helped to kind of give extra definition to my image. As always, all of the products that I used today will be listed in the description box below for you. Obviously, some of the newer items I won't have links for yet, but next week when they go live, I will be sure to add them in for you. I also want to be super transparent and just let you know that as a member of the design team, I did receive these products to use for free, but I am under no obligation to use them in any of my videos or to do the sneak peek video. I just absolutely fell in love with the new images and these new embossing products, and I really thought that you guys would like to see them and get a sneak peek, and hopefully just kind of get you excited for more spring projects in general. I am so happy that the weather has finally really broken here. We have lots of sun, a good bit of rain still, but enough sun to really keep me going and kind of just get ready for summer and spring, and just kind of being able to be outside all the time. Those are just things that bring me joy, and crafting with things that kind of give me that same feeling to me is just such a gift that I really just wanted to share it with you. So quickly back to the card. Once I had that outline done, I decided that I wanted to add a little bit of splatter. So you'll see I'm kind of just covering up my floral image with my hand and just adding some splatters, watery splatters of that ground espresso just around the outside of my background, and using a little bit of clean water as well. And then I'll just kind of blot everything up. I think that this just adds a little bit of that extra garden kind of feel to this, but if that's not your style, you could absolutely skip that part. So once I had everything done and my panel dried a little bit, I grabbed some of my one of my pattern paper packs. This is the pumpkin season, which I get is kind of the opposite feeling, but I am so in love with this chocolatey brown wood grain, and I just thought this would go perfectly with that kind of dirt themed or rustic or whatever themed background that I created with those brown inks. And so I trimmed that down to an A2 size panel, and I trimmed a little bit off of my watercolor panel. This did mean that I lost some of those leaves on the side, but I think that having that darker brown border the whole way around really helped to ground the whole piece, and I think it was worth it. So if that's not your style, you could always use this smaller floral spray, or the other backup option would have been if I had had the dies, or if I felt like fussy cutting, you could always put that as a separate layer on top and let your leaves overhang that border. So either way, I hope you're feeling super inspired. I am so grateful that you came to hang out with me today. Make sure you keep an eye out for those new Pink and Main release coming to you next Friday, April 22nd. And as always, happy crafting.